Welcome everyone to Hermitage Conversations. This is Ajahn Cunda, my friend Ajahn Kovilo,
That's right.
Kalyana Metta,
Yep.
and my other Kalyana Metta, Nisabho.
Thanks, Ajahn. Appreciate that.
Anytime. So, hoping everybody had a pleasant weekend, and we had a pleasant weekend.
Yeah.
Wasn't too, and in fact, there was some sun on Sunday,
Mm.
so we had a nice conversation on the deck. That was really nice.
Yeah.
Dharma conversation.
All the snow's completely melted from around here. We had 8 or more inches on Christmas and slowly melting, but our stream is really rushing these days. So
Yeah, a few waterfalls in Bindabat, which has been great to see.
Is it as loud at your Kuti, the river, the stream?
A little bit,
Yeah,
maybe.
it's pretty loud,
Mm.
but it's nice. I like it. By the water. So hello to everyone. Lots of people joining us. Very nice, especially a lot of community members from White Salmon and Portland. Nice to see everyone.
We wanted to, we'll be talking about a topic which Ajahn Chunda will go into, but just, once again, everyone feel free to, if our sound's bad or there's technological difficulties, feel free to chime in, and questions on meditation or practice are very welcome even as we talk about this. Just feel free to type them in and we'll try to get to them.
The Kosambiyans of Kosambiya Sutta there's a precursor to it, which is the story of you mentioned last time of the water dipper. We're talking about toilet water and whatever it was that we were mentioning, but it's essentially a disagreement amongst a group of monks. And the interesting thing about the disagreement is how trifling it is and how actually ridiculous and silly it is that somebody would be worried about the knowledge of not knowing that a water dipper should be either placed in a vessel or out of a vessel, or not have the water in it or have the water in it, and then an entire dispute arose out of that, and two factions came out of that dispute, and there was so much quarreling that it upset everyone, not only the monks but the lay people who were in the community supporting the monks. So much so that the Buddha couldn't even calm them down. And they had to be essentially what it seems like is starved by the lay people in order to kind of come to their senses. Oh, maybe this isn't worth it.
right, yeah, the lay people agreed. So first, they're having this conflict, the monks, over this very small issue, and then Buddha actually leaves. He tried to kind of bring the monks together.
They suggest that he goes too, which is another one.
Exactly, yeah, they
pretty
suggest
bold.
he leaves. Then he does leave, and then the lay people are put out like, how could you monks be so kind of ridiculous as to basically drive the Buddha out, and then they
Dismiss your teacher.
stop feeding the monks. So
Yeah. Which will do it. If you ever want to have us come to our senses, you can stop feeding us.
right.
And fasting will only can only go so far.
And the sutta it's a profound sutta, but we don't want it to, the theme that it will be tapping into is one of communal harmony and living together, getting along, settling disputes, etc. So just to make it more accessible for those who haven't read, I posted the link to the sutta, but we want to, if you haven't read it, it's fine. Just the themes of communal harmony are sort of on the table for this week. So feel free to ask questions on those or just on your practice in general. And we'll be speaking about these topics. The sutta is just there in the background if we also want to talk about it as well.
How's the volume, by the way? Oh, there's my mom. Hello, Sangha. So how's the volume? Is everybody, can everybody hear us? Can everybody hear me? And maybe not if they're not responding. But, Ajahn Kovilo, thumbs up. Anybody? If you can hear us. We'll patiently wait.
No news is good news.
Yeah, I guess no news is good news.
Let's
We'll
carry
continue.
on.
Well, you bring up a good point. Some of the specific issue which came to this about a water dipper, basically in the bathroom. It seems like a trivial thing, and it is certainly from 2,500 years of hindsight. But it's the exact type of thing which, people in any size community. We see the exact same things today, like in monasteries. But I imagine everybody here, whether you're just living with your family or just with a spouse or significant other, it's the exact stuff which, we're all, dealing with, just the tiny, facts of life that we have to deal with in the bathroom if we're sharing a bathroom with someone else, or if we're sharing a house with someone else. And I think it's, it's not at all like irrelevant. We're still as petty as we were 2,500 years ago. So
yeah, we can find just a little mistake, and often that's where aversion just colors the mind, and all of a sudden it takes over, and you even catch yourself. You can't know like the bigger view, like, oh, this really is just a water dipper. This is just a fork in where the spoons go, and whatever it might be, and all of a sudden aversion takes over, and then there's just these blinders go on, and we can't really see what it is that's going on. We just start expressing our anger, and we don't see the larger picture of like, oh, this is just anger, and this kind of giving to views. The ridiculous part is just how these monks are what it is that they're quarreling about is such a trifle, I think. So it's interesting that we still make something out of nothing today, and it's just so common.
Yeah, and the interesting thing is, out of this trivial dispute comes one of my favorite suttas in the whole Sutta Pitaka. The Buddha, it's both really practical and pretty profound. So basically the Buddha outlines these 6 causes for cordiality or harmony within a community. And first is maintaining loving kindness in acts of body, acts of speech, acts of mind to one's companions, both in front to their faces and behind their backs, which is interesting phrasing and it's important. And then when one receives something, one shares it before consuming it. The 5th is, what's the 5th again?
With virtue, like they share the same. You share the same, basically, ethical code. The whole thing is framed in a very monastic vocabulary, but really, it's just saying you keep up the same standards of ethics, and that's really important whether you're a monk or a non-monk. And the last quality is?
And the last quality, no, that's a really important one, Ajahn Kovilo. And the last one is to shared right view within a community and with one's fellows in the spiritual life. And then that gets into, the Buddha sort of outlines these 7 parts of that, but not to get too drawn into that at the moment, but just the idea that when one is with others in relationship, that this right view binds people together. And I find that very profound and related a lot to this life and to the sense of spiritual friendship which begins to develop as you step further and further into the practice. Is the relationships are just, for me at least, much less fragile because they're bound together by something more than just how well we're getting along in the moment, which can be good or bad depending. But the sense of right view, it's like a bicycle. If it's like moving forward towards something, it's much more stable. So I'm curious what your venerable experiences are with that whole dynamic in that 6th or any of the others, really.
Well, I mean, I think the Buddha, he often comes back to right view. I mean, this is like fundamental to his teachings. Is it's like I like to think of it as like the foundation. So like if a house or anything that you have, you want to have a basic firm foundation that you can build something on. And without right view, then everything can really be shaky. So you could still have acts of kindness towards your friends, but if you don't have right view, then those acts of kindness are actually possibly not meant for the same purpose. They're just maybe kindness without really having a basis of understanding, of really seeing like the Four Noble Truths and trying to see our lives through them. So I think that's where the Buddha really, he over and over again. I mean, if you want to ask like what are the Buddha's teachings, and Ajahn Chah emphasizes this as well. It's really like right view is foundational for our practice. So we want to always come back to that and not necessarily forget it when we're thinking, oh, I want to be compassionate in this moment, or I want to be friendly, or I want to do the right thing. I want to practice these rules. Well, if you're not coming from right view, if you're not coming from a lens of seeing through the Four Noble Truths, then you might not be actually understanding why it is that you're doing things. So I just really delight in that kind of, that keep bringing it back to that right view.
I only looked up briefly to see a question, but someone was asking about like how do we maintain practice in throughout daily life, keeping awareness in daily life. And I think this is I think there's some overlap here with what you're talking about right view. Like how do we, practically speaking, what does it mean to keep a lens of right view through our daily lives, and how do we do that? And I think it's a great question. It's like an essential question, and yeah, I think it might be different for different practitioners, like finding skillful means that work for you to really reestablish connection with seeing clearly, seeing things in a non-biased way. The sutta goes into the first kind of these reviewing knowledges is that one asks oneself, is my mind clouded by greed, anger, or delusion, or the hindrances in a way which would make me not see things in line with how they truly are? And this can be a question which you ask ourselves, and one way to really get oneself to do this throughout the day is, I know you've visited Thich Nhat Hanh's monasteries, but you, Nisabho?
Oh, me,
Yeah.
this guy. I have.
Yeah, not me. I wasn't reacting for that reason.
But at those monasteries, they have like throughout the day, they've got bells going off, at various times to really it's like a moment to reestablish your connection with the body, with the path, really. So that's one practical way to, throughout the day, is just, create ways to stop and reconnect.
Yeah.
I was thinking how what we were talking about earlier. So in the 12th stanza here, the Buddha talks about. So in the Sutta 48, he says, "What is the character of a person who possesses right view? This is the character of a person who possesses right view. Although he may be active in various matters for his companions in the holy life, yet he has a keen regard for training in the higher virtue, training in the higher mind, and training in the higher wisdom. Just as a cow with a new calf, while she grazes, watches her calf, so too that is the character of a person who possesses right view." And this goes back to that question, how in daily life can we maintain our sense of knowledge and awareness. And I was talking to Ajahn Kovilo about this, possibly being the Buddha was saying multitasking is good, and in a way I think there's a possibility of that, but really what he's talking about is there's a keen interest in the Dhamma, there's a keen kind of interest in what it is that our mind is focusing on. So we have to kind of review, we have to bring up in our mind, this is what mindfulness really is. It's like your mind is full of what is wholesome. You're keeping in mind the what the Buddha's teachings are essentially. And so through that potential, then what we're trying to do throughout our day is we're aware that we have jobs to do, tasks to do, or like a monk needs to still be responsible for things that are helping his friends in the holy life, but at the same time he has an interest in maintaining his mind, maintaining understanding, maintaining right view, seeing through the Four Noble Truths. But also when he's done with certain tasks, it doesn't mean he's not mindful when he's doing them, but when he's done, he's keen to put them down and go and continue, like possibly this formal practice, or with any of the practices that are bringing us closer to the Dhamma. So that's something that's also there. Is like we don't just kind of go back and I'm done with my duties and I tried to maintain mindfulness. That's great. Now I'll watch some Netflix. It's more like we go back and we really try to maintain an interest and a joy in the practice. And so that's kind of what's there. Or you can do M&M. So that's what Bhante Rahula suggests is a mindfulness minute. So you try to each hour just say, okay, I'm going to stop and I'm going to be mindful for just 1 minute. I'm going to stop what I'm doing. So all kinds of ways.
No, I like that, and the sense both of you are pointing to of keeping the cow keeping one eye on the calf, and trying to maintain that grounding and anchor through, say, the mindfulness minute, my sense is that meditation, in answer to that question as well, like 2 sessions a day is really helpful. Like, a lot of research points to around 20 minutes in the morning being a certain threshold for a certain level of change in someone's happiness. But then I really find if one can get a decent, session in the morning and the evening, then all the, for me at least, the whole day can become imbued with this sense of Dhamma. And that's, I think, the beauty of this is that certain practices really lend themselves to this, because sometimes it can be exhausting and can almost fracture you to try to keep one mind, say, on the breath, and one part of your mind speaking to someone. But certain practices like the Brahma Viharas, the Metta, loving kindness, for me at least, I don't know if you have this experience, but they're states that are very amenable to activity, and they aren't broken or fragile or brittle in the same way. So for me, if I have a period of the day or the week or my life where I know I'm going to have a lot of activity, actively cultivating that in situations, somehow it doesn't lead to the same sort of cold sense of separation, which can be there if someone gets really stressed out about trying to keep, say, part of their mind on the breath while they're speaking with someone. But it lends itself to a certain grace of movement and attention, which isn't at odds with interacting with people. And so all those things become part of the practice. And for me, a really good measure of that is you feel it in your body. If your heart's in something, it really can be very much part of the path. And if you're really asking questions, and then for me, there's sort of a very intuitive sense of queasiness when I know that I'm doing something that isn't worthy of me, which is idle or wasting time. I don't know if you have that experience, but for me, coming into the body and those anchors of meditation throughout the day really let me apply that litmus test regularly. And for me, there is a definite sense when you're acting in line with the Dhamma and when you're not. And loving kindness meditation is very helpful for making all things fall into that category. And I don't know what your experiences are with that.
Yeah, similar experience. I think most people, it's actually the rare meditator who I've met who is really able to practice breath meditation consistently in a community environment, even if that community is meditation focused, like in a monastery, whereas like the breath or loving kindness meditation, those are both, topics which are fully amenable to conversation, to interacting with other people. And you can tell a lot from where your mind's at with, how your posture is, there's a relationship, the Pali word uju means upright, and it signifies both an uprightness of mind, integrity of mind, and like upright and kind of, buoyancy, like a force of levity with the body. So
I think there's a sort of classic trope in young monastics where you read about Longta Mahabua deciding he's just going to recite Buddha in his head for until he's enlightened or gets samadhi. I don't know. Do you know monks who've tried this? Because I tried it, and most monks I know have tried it, and it goes very badly, very quickly. It's like
He's the Buddha master.
Yeah. Anyways, for me, you really try to keep it up, and you sort of really go for it, and you just end up miserable after 2 days. At least I did when I tried to do it ceaselessly,
or you make your companions in the holy life miserable.
Yeah, one or the other.
Not you.
That could be me. Yeah, definitely. No, I definitely see that. I mean, what I liken it to with the original question about how to maintain this in everyday life is maybe there's a frustration that it's difficult. It's difficult because we maintain activities. We're doing things all the time, and it's not that easy to kind of maintain really the Eightfold Path in our mind all the time. And so, but at the same time, if people are frustrated with that, it's understandable that just comes up because essentially what we're doing is akin to building a muscle. And as we're following the Buddhist path, we can imagine that we have quite weak muscles in the beginning, and so we're trying to learn what is the best way and a way that I can enjoy actually kind of working out and flexing these muscles and growing them. And what these muscles are is, they're flexing our our sense of sati and sampajanya, our samadhi, our wisdom, our effort that's going in the right way. And so as we learn more and more how to do that, then it becomes easier to like pick something up that normally would have been quite heavy. And it's not so heavy anymore because we have worked on those muscles. And it's not an easy path. I mean, the fact is we do have so many things we have to do. So we're learning basically how to enjoy the Buddhist path, but how to also strengthen our minds so we can use all of these wholesome path factors to our advantage. And then when we are doing something like talking with somebody, we can maintain mindfulness. Like I'm trying to do that right now. Like what's actually going on in my body? What's my experience right now? It's am I happy? Is there like some sadness? Is there anxiety or worry? What's the present experience I'm having? And then I can be with that, and then I react from that as well, and then see where I need to sort of sometimes pull back and say like, oh, maybe this isn't a time to engage, or feeling like you were saying, like maybe there's non-authenticity. You might be talking to somebody, but you don't feel like you're actually coming from a good place. Somebody was saying sometimes they let their calf run loose. And so that's another thing. You can kind of either forget about your calf, which is the important thing you're trying to keep your eye on, and maybe just focus on the grass you're grazing on. But you kind of need to keep them both in awareness, like whatever it is you're doing, and then sort of these wholesome states that you're trying to generate. So, yeah, build those muscles. Yeah, strengthen those muscles.
When speaking of muscles, I mean, a really interesting point in the end of this sutta is the Buddha says that the strength of one with right view is their interest in listening to the Dhamma, and that when the Dhamma is being spoken, they like lend an eager ear. And I find it so interesting, the use of the word strength associated with listening. And for me, speaking about how to interact with activity in the world and others, it's rare that when I stop and am silent and listen to someone that I feel like it was the wrong thing to do. It's such a safe, there's such power in that act, and people need to be heard and their stories heard. And and I know Mother Teresa said that someone asked what she did when she prayed, and she said, I just listened to God. And they said, what does God say? And she said, he just listens back. So for me, something about that, how to maintain sort of the sense of Dhamma in a daily life, especially in activity, I think just that reminder of coming into that place of listening and receptivity is extremely powerful, along with the Brahma Viharas. And and just I think the Brahma Viharas, they're sort of labeled as the boundless mind states, is very helpful because they aren't brittle in this way. They can pervade, and they are very robust. So yeah, I don't know. We have a few questions, Ajans.
Let's listen.
Let's listen.
What should be the balance between meditation and contemplation? Is there even a difference in your opinion? If so, how would you go about balancing those in practice? That's a question that's come up quite a lot for people about contemplation, and I really appreciate Lumpur Sumedho's takes on that. He seems to answer that question a lot for people. For me, I think contemplation is really about what we're doing now. We're thinking about the Dhamma, and it's possible to kind of take on the Buddhist teachings, especially at first, and you're just focused really on samadhi. That's all it is. It's just, if I just follow this breath in and out for the next 30 years, I don't have to ask any questions. I'll just get enlightened and be happy. But that's not, I don't find that's the case. I find that there needs to be some reflection involved. There needs to be some contemplation. And in terms of what that means, I think it's just as simple as reflecting on some of the teachings that the Buddha says, just a very short statement. You can think of just anything that we've talked about in the sutta and just bring that up. You can think about what Nisabho was just talking about with metta. If you've never practiced metta, you just kind of look into what is metta, and you reflect on that. What does loving kindness mean for you? some people have said it's very difficult for them to generate loving kindness. They don't really know how to. And so you think of ways you can do that. There's just all kinds of ways. But when is one ready for reflection? I would say that a good gauge of that is if you try to reflect on something from the Buddha's teachings and you can't. In other words, your mind is just so filled with thought, then you do need to go back to kind of a more calming quality. So some way that you can calm yourself and essentially bring the mind back to a focus. I don't so much like the word concentration, but a way that you can kind of, bring your mind into a center for yourself, so that you're able to see things very clearly. And if you're not able to do that, it's going to be really hard to reflect on teachings. So that's sort of my take on it. Do you have anything you'd like to add?
Just listening, Kovilo? You go for it.
Yeah, just listening and provoking some thoughts about, I mean, we can't just give up the thinking process at the outset. And like Ajahn Chunda was saying, many people, think that is the path. I mean, there is kind of like a Zen ethos that people think, what is meditation? Meditation is not thinking. Whereas, really, I mean, even the first jhana, I mean, it's not thinking, but one of the factors for the first jhana is vitakka, which this is a word which has a wide range of meanings, and it's used in other instances just for thinking. It's the mind that thinks. Certainly in the first jhana, it's an extremely subtle, very, very, very refined and specific and repetitive form of thinking, whereas the vitakka that we do in daily life is less subtle,
analytical, and heavy thinking kind of thing.
Yeah, but we can incline ourselves in that direction, like thinking in the direction of letting thinking go. And I think, contemplation is a very specific use of thoughts in the thought process. And there's certainly a place for it. The word meditation doesn't really exist in Pali. Bhavana is cultivation, and there are all sorts of different ways to bhavana in the Pali canon. A lot of them are recollections, buddhanusati, recollection of the Buddha, recollection of the Dhamma, recollection of different parts of the body. And there's parts of these which are analytical and which are like you're just thinking about these things, not in a proliferative kind of way, but in a way which is inclining towards letting go. And that's what we got to do. This is our tool. Like, we're born with brains, and we can't automatically just shut them off. So,
and the quality of that is it is in a way pacifying the mind. So one of the things that you want to look at as you're contemplating and reflecting is you're not actually getting more amped up and kind of or interested in your desire or sensuality or something like that. It's something that is providing peace and insight and calm. And interest, it's not like boring you, but there's an interest that's there too. I was trying to think of a line like, one of the suttas that we recite very often is, one of the lines is like, ever seeking fresh delight, now here, now there. And just taking something like that in the mind and just contemplating that, over and over again. What does the Buddha really mean by that? And if you think about that, it's like, wow, it's just like almost every moment it's just ever seeking fresh delight, now here, now there.
And I agree. And looking at how our vitakka usually works like that, and then directing it, like you said, and then also the standard set of recollections, which Ajahn Kovilo, you brought up, around buddhanusati and all these things, like ways of using thought to move towards quieting thought. And it sort of overlaps with two of the questions. First was Stephen asking about the sound of silence, which is a meditation object that Ajahn Longpo Sumedho teaches a lot, called the nada sound. I don't know if Ajahns, you've worked with this. I have quite a lot, and I still use it. For those unfamiliar, it's if you pay attention to the mind or sort of your auditory landscape when things are quiet, you can hear a faint ringing. And if you give attention to it over time, it becomes louder and louder, and eventually can be there throughout the day, even over. I know Ajahn Amaro's cultivated it to a great extent, to the point he can hear it over power tools. And Longpo Sumedho used it to get through all the meetings of the board at the beginning of Amravati. I've heard teachers refer to it as the auditory equivalent of the perception of light. I've heard it referred to as the recollection of cessation. But these are all esoteric things. The point is, it's very powerful. I use it quite a lot. And Longpo Sumedho, Ajahn Cunda referenced this a few weeks ago, spoke about it, how he woke up with it, went to sleep with it, like a lover almost. And it's a very powerful object, especially when paired with the breath. And just the other thing to bring up quickly was, Ajahn Cunda was speaking about how metta can be difficult for some people to cultivate. And Casey was, saying that him and his wife had really put their intention towards developing it. And I find it such a powerful practice that the kilesa block it quite easily for me. And one of the most helpful tools I've come across in terms of using vitakka to approach metta, using thought to approach loving kindness, is Longpo Sumedho recommends, instead of sending out metta and generating it like little beams, you shrink the people and bring them into your heart. I found it makes all the difference. So
I like the Metta Death Star. Where you just
I like kittens. Kittens. Yeah.
That actually also helps. I've heard that recommended.
Yeah. Just anything that really generates this feeling of kindness for others. Kindness for, and if you can't for others, then kittens. I mean, usually people don't have a hard time for kittens.
Some people don't like kittens.
Dogs, puppies.
Puppies are better in general.
Calves.
Do we all agree on this? Are we all dog people?
Yeah, you can.
Sorry.
But anyway, yeah, there's lots of ways to try to generate it, but it's not. It's just to say that it's not always so easy for people. I remember being quite bored with it when I was first learning it. I would fall asleep quite a bit. But when one gets very versed in it, then as we were talking about with kind of reflection, you use phrases often. That's the traditional approach, but eventually, as one gets more proficient with metta, the phrases are not as necessary, and then it could even just be one word. And then again, as I was talking about strengthening a muscle, someone who's worked on metta quite a bit has the potential to actually just like say that word, or even without the word, they get to a point where they can just know that feeling, and then they bring that feeling up to themselves, and then metta just is there. And it can be quite accessible to the point where they're very strong. They have a very strong sense of metta, and that's just because they've done it so often that they have an understanding. Oh, this is the feeling, and I want to generate it right now. In other times, they might want to generate more equanimity or compassion or whatever it might be.
For me, one way to kind of tie it in with this other practice we've been talking about, like mindfulness of the body, is like, in general, paying attention to like this uprightness of the body. But with metta, like it's almost like the opposite for me. Like in the Metta Sutta, this word comes up, mudu, which means basically like soft and tender. And for me, that's like, that's the affective tone of metta, of loving kindness, is just softness, just relaxing, just like melting. And often that's like the exact like physical antidote to, because if like annoyance or irritation is coming up, it's actually my body, is just getting more and more kind of rigid and uptight and stuck into my whatever tiny view of the world and my environment I see. And then just metta, it's like, okay, just relax the shoulders, relax my heart, relax my face, and and then I'm more in a position, it's like butter melting down my face.
And we come back into that kind of, as we were talking about, circling around, like if you're not aware of your body, then it can be quite difficult. You can't really notice. It's hard to really notice like what is going on here. Like you can be like, I really don't want to talk to this person. I wish this conversation would end.
Right.
I could be here like, I hate this live stream. I just don't want to be here anymore, and I don't know it. And you guys are, what's wrong with Cunda? I don't know. But if we're not paying attention to our bodies, then we don't know really what's happening. And then we can have that softness just by recollecting that awareness. Actually, I find the softness just comes right in. it's like sati sambhajanya, awareness and clear comprehension just really opens the door to, oh, right, this is what I'm experiencing right now. And then the softness, kind of that nurturing can come in. And
Yeah.
butter, let the butter in.
Butter on
Let
the
the butter
face.
in,
Yeah, down the back.
I regret aligning the Sangha with puppies and dogs. I think we all appreciate both.
Yeah.
Apologies.
Yeah.
Both are great. And yeah, and also the another skillful means for metta, which Ajahn Viradhammo recommends, is right when you wake up, the heart's very accessible right then. So if you bring your awareness to that area, for me, I find, speaking of the body and its location, it's, if you sort of, he speaks about as soon as he wakes up, before he does anything, he sort of just lies there and brings awareness to the heart and gets a glow going. And I find it's very true. Right when you wake up, the subconscious is very accessible and malleable. And yeah, a question around, or a comment around the eating vegetarian and various food preferences, and also about maintaining verbal acts of loving kindness being the most difficult of all of these for Holly.
Yeah, well, that's pretty obvious. Like, kind of when you're engaged in speech with people, it's so. I just find it's kind of like, I would just talk about my experience right now, like just being on the live stream, speaking with my two friends, knowing there's a camera in front of me, and trying to listen, trying to not be too obsessed with what I think I want to say or anything like that. It's very hard. So I really agree with that. The skill of speaking and listening and calmly, like, reflecting and being able to talk with people from a very clear sense of what would be most useful in the situation. It's not easy. It's not easy at all. And again, it's like, we are trying to build skills. We are trying to train ourselves in this. So it's completely understandable that this is something I would say is like one of the forefront, front burner skills for me. It's just really trying to learn how to be as skillful as I can with speech. And it's not easy, because those patterns, they just keep coming up, keep coming back over and over again with, our just what we've been developing over the many years of our lives. And not to negate that and kind of put ourselves down. We don't have to take it personally, but it's just our karma. It can be things that we've had happen to us during our lives or from our past lives, that have kind of just built these habits and kept them going.
I think in the past you've called it foot in mouth disorder.
Yeah, there can be foot and mouth disorder, and that's a tough one, because the feet are not very tasty either. So so it's it's not easy to really get our speech right, and it seems like we can often have a lot of regret around it too.
One thing which I think this sutta highlights with regards to the second question that we're talking about exactly what you touched on, like verbal acts of loving kindness. The sutta points to in public and in private, when with others and when you're not with others. And I think this point of maintaining verbal acts of kindness towards others when you're not with them kind of habituates you to speaking kindly and in a loving way to others when you are with them. So when you're away from your spouse, or when you're away from your family, I mean, it can start off as, like verbal or like mental, just your thoughts. How are you thinking about the people who you're going to be interacting with, your family members, your coworkers? But you can actually, like rehearsing kind things to say, and actually verbalizing out loud the things that you're grateful to these people in your life for. And if you do that, basically you're training the same muscle, like the simile that we've been using. And when you're with those people, I mean, you might be triggered, but you've built up this muscle, and hopefully those words will come out more readily than the more harsh languages. So
I really agree, and you bring up an interesting, I think I quoted it as to their faces and behind their backs, but actually in public and in private. And that's a really important distinction, because it means, even when you're alone, kind of paying attention to your own mental chatter and internal dialogue around these. Because I think, I mentioned before, like in the suttas, there's this thing about abiding in abiding in aversion. And it's true that aversion can really be this low level buzz that we spend our lives in if we're not careful. That's very insidious and subtle. And really paying attention to that. And I think this has a place with, bowing in the morning and the evening to teachers we respect. Little things like setting up a shrine in your room. In most American households, the highest shelf is dedicated to, the liquor and stuff. So really TV as well, the altar is there, but we worship, but we don't call it that, but making sure we know what we're worshiping and establishing that as a private act. And for me, this also ties into a previous question around how to go about figuring out how dependent origination works. Does the general principle imply one could drop nasty mental things like bad habits by removing its root causes? And dependent origination is it's one of the biggest topics in Buddhism. But for me, one could talk about removing its causes, and that would be useful. But in terms of tying it into this conversation, I think Longpo Suchito says that metta can be characterized as having respect for one's conditions and or another's. And so I think if you're bringing someone's in your mind with a level of aversion, and you're really trying to change that perception in private with loving kindness, but it's just like kind of throwing I don't know, pink hearts at them, and it's really not working. Then really looking to the conditions that brought them to where they are. And as once again, if you sort of track things back, I find to the first noble truth of suffering, to the original trauma or break that caused someone to be as they are, then I find metta is the natural result of that. So that's one of the ways I appreciate using dependent origination in terms of this conversation.
That's what Shelley wrote there a while back. That is what I meant when I thought about being in her shoes, metta, I guess. And often when we try to really understand a person from their own conditions, their own perspective, then we just lose that sense of anger or hatred towards them. So it's like it's no longer seeing your own conditioning, your own kind of views about who you think that person is. It's more stretching like, well, maybe I really have no idea, and you're trying to really understand, well, maybe there's something going on here that I just don't see clearly. And it's that opening of the mind that allows us to have more spaciousness and caring quality for others. I'm trying to remember a quote, but there's a really good quote. Maybe I'll remember it the next live stream. But it's something like, if we were to know just somebody else's suffering, just a person suffering, just even a moment of how they suffer in their life, it would be enough to just quell and quiet down any kind of notion that we have of just hatred towards anybody. And so it is incredibly important to try to stop that mental flow when we have aversion towards someone. And I think most of you probably know what I mean. You're sitting in meditation and you're just thinking of this person, not a Jacoba, and I'm just looking at you, and you're just thinking, God, I can't stand this person, and then even we add on top of that, it's like, well, he didn't actually say that to me, but if he had said that to me, I would have really given it to him, yeah, and this is what I would have done. And it's just, it's so pretty much ridiculous what we do, but we're adding on more and more aversion to our experience. And so in our meditation, when we're talking about doing acts of kindness in private, then that is really trying to maintain a different voice for ourselves, a different way that we're used to in how we relate to other people. And so if you think about all the garbage that comes up around how we relate to imaginary people or how we imagine them to be in our meditation, and we actually do exactly what both Venerables are suggesting, you actually have like a pleasant conversation with somebody, or you think about all of their good qualities. Say, wait a minute, they must have some good qualities. Then we have that potential to really turn the mind around, and you might think, well, that's not really meditation, is it? But why not? Why is it not to actually bring up somebody's good qualities, and then all of a sudden your mind state changes and you're no longer aversive? So the whole point, that is a metta act, is to try to really get our minds out of the muck. So we have to just find whatever expedient means we can that will allow us to move into the wholesome rather than unwholesome.
It's a really good point.
Tadu? Do we
Yeah.
want to wrap up?
Yeah, it's been about 45 minutes. Very good.
We've really enjoyed these conversations. We're still getting used to them, but it's really a pleasure to be tapping into the community here. And yeah, we'll continue on the same theme for Friday.
Harmony?
Yeah.
Harmony, supplemented by the Sutta Kosambiya Sutta Majjhima Nikaya 48, but with ample openings for various questions. The last two questions perhaps we'll have a chance to address next time, but at the very least you can paste them during the next live chat as we begin, in case we forget.
Yeah, so we will see you Friday morning if you'd like to join us a bit early, 7 a.m.
Please maintain thoughts of loving kindness towards us and towards each other.
Towards kittens, too.
Towards
And
kittens.
puppies.
In public and in private.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right.